It always hides from me. So we are looking together at the the Ten Commandments, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7. And we prayed about letting Jesus lead us and teach us and guide us. And that's really what the Sermon on the Mount is. It's the first, Matthew has five um, sort of large groupings of Jesus's teachings in his gospel, and the Sermon on the Mount is the first one, and it really is uh, just letting Jesus. Hearing the Sermon on the Mount is hearing Jesus teach us the kind of people he wants us to be and is making us into, and teaching us the kinds of things that are important in God's kingdom. Um, and how we might have to think differently about ourselves and the world around us and other people uh, and even um, and even religion. And so as we're into chapter 5, we looked last week um, at Jesus first of all saying, "I didn't come to abolish the law or the prophets, but to fulfill them." And the idea being that Jesus did not come in his day saying, um, throw away the law of Moses. He came in his day saying, I want you to live it out more completely, more fully. I want you to live it out um, more with more righteousness, and that's what he says in verse 20. I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. And there were probably people hearing that who thought to themselves, well, how in the world can we be more righteous than the people who spend their lives studying and figuring out how to apply the law of Moses? How can we possibly be more righteous than them? They've devoted their lives to the keeping of the law in its entirety and in its fullness. And how in the world how could we be more righteous than they? And Jesus gives the first example, the example of the commandment that says, "You shall not murder, you shall not kill." And how does he tweak that commandment, or how does he change the way we should understand that commandment?
Well, he asks, he's not looking at just the specific act of murder. He's looking at uh, what happens in a person's heart, just even from anger at someone. But the idea that that kind of feeling towards someone could lead to this physical act of murder, so that you should start working on it or controlling it before it would ever come to performing the physical act.
And I would just add, even if it doesn't lead to the act
Well,
itself, the attitude, the anger that you're hanging on to, the contempt with which you treat somebody is a comparable. Jesus isn't saying it's the same thing. He's saying, you know, we're all concerned about not killing. Yeah, I agree, we shouldn't kill. But what about the attitudes that we have toward each other? What about the contempt with which we treat one another? What about the insults? What about in our day, the demeaning posts and the insulting language, and um, I, we need to deal with that. We need to righteous as God wants us to be righteous. We have to deal with that part of our lives too, that our hearts, our minds. We have to deal with the stuff gets us to that place where we're just furious with our brother or sister and delight um, in putting them down and treating them with contempt.
I think Jesus would say, you go so far as to kill someone with your word, kill somebody with your words. Moses never said that. He didn't go that far. He didn't go that deep. He just said, thou shalt not murder, period. A little difference there.
And Jesus, by the way, Jesus is not turning up the law to 11. What he's doing is is talking about the attitude we should that should always have been shown toward the law and was shown by people who were intentional about keeping it. He's arguing he's arguing against a misrepresentation of the law. And sometimes Christians still do that, where sometimes we tend to say, well, the law was just about the surface. It was just about, checking off a list. And that was never what it was supposed to be. I mean, the prophets talked about circumcising your heart, right? The idea being it wasn't just about keeping surface commandments. It was also about your heart being changed. So Jesus is just kind of in step with what the prophets always said and what was always God's intention for the law. In that vein, he turns to another commandment in verse 27. He writes, or he says, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. It's a similar approach, right? Don't commit adultery. Adultery is a very specific word in Jesus' day. Adultery meant you don't sleep with somebody else's wife or husband. You don't have that right. You don't have that. You can't do that. And so that was the commandment. You shall not commit adultery. The coveting, the commandment against covetousness sort of picks up on that thread too, and includes your neighbor's wife and the things that you shall not covet. And that's more what Jesus is sort of talking about here, right? It's kind of interesting that the Ten Commandments do eventually turn toward not just actions, but also feelings. Don't covet your neighbor's wife, ox, house, whatever it is. You don't covet what belongs to your neighbor. That's more a heart attitude, right? Although I suppose covetousness could come out in action, but it's kind of a heart attitude that's being legislated there. So that's not far off from what Jesus says here, right? That's not just committing adultery. It's looking at a woman lustfully. It's holding that in your mind and in your heart and just turning that over and just hanging on to it and living your life in that way.
He's not assuming that women wouldn't
No,
I mean,
think that way.
it's
they don't have problems.
Potiphar's wife certainly.
right. Yeah, I think Jesus would not say it's okay for women to look lustfully. I just think it's a society in which men are the sort of the aggressors in that area, and
But we know about it. It's been going on since the beginning.
well, yeah, I mean, I don't think, I don't think it's exactly it's not one-sided, and I don't think Jesus means that here either. I think he's just And I know you didn't really think so, but Diana looking for a loophole over here. But
What he's saying is deal with the struggle.
Yeah.
Men and women,
yeah, and it's
before it gets to this point of adultery.
and yeah, it's again, it's not just the commandment is not just about uh, the physical act. The commandment is about the thoughts and dwelling and keeping that in your head um, we live in a world where I think probably um, sexuality is just much more sort of out there and sort of blatant in our world than it was in Jesus's world. And it's still something we need to consider and keep in our minds and be serious about.
Say Jesus is very serious about it.
Yeah,
This is the most serious part of the sermon.
What he says to do, and I mean, people have taken him literally through the centuries and done more than just gouge out eyes and cut off hands. Origen famously castrated himself at one point in his
Who did?
Origen, early church father.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, second century. Jesus isn't, I mean, that's not, we understand, I think that's not what he's saying to do. He's using hyperbole to make his point that this matters. This is important.
Something that it's such an important thing to keep this under control that,
Take it seriously.
He recommends these horrible acts that you might commit on your side. I'm assuming he didn't expect anyone he's just trying to emphasize how important it is.
The problem, of course, is not in the eye or the hand.
Right, exactly.
The problem is in the heart and in what you're dwelling on and where your thoughts dwell and live. And I remember somebody telling me one time,
He just said that to get their attention.
you can't. What was the line when I was a teenager? One of our teachers said, you can't keep a bird from landing on your head, but you can keep it from building a nest there. So I think you could keep a bird from landing on your head, but I understood his point, I think. I think I understood what he was getting at. It's
Yeah. You see, the point here, is it not difficult for human nature these days? Can somebody look at somebody and then the third party will say that the way you are looking at the fellow, I mean, you have committed adultery? Is it possible?
Well, I'm sorry.
What Jesus was saying here, if I look at you mentally, I mean, if somebody is standing there, I was looking at a woman, somebody's wife, the way I was looking at the fellow, but through spiritually, as for Jesus, the way you were looking at the fellow, he knows already that what is in your mind. That's what I'm asking. We today, excuse me to say, if I'm standing with, we are standing as 2 or 3, and then we saw somebody's wife is coming, and you, a preacher, standing there, I'm standing there, and I was looking at the woman, can you suggest in your mind a straight ahead that the way Jacob is looking at this woman, he has committed adultery? Is it possible?
So you're asking if
I'm asking.
you look at someone, is it committing adultery?
Yeah.
Jesus says committing adultery with her in his heart.
In his heart.
I think he makes a distinction between the two things, but he's not saying that one is less than the other. He's just saying that, this thing that you're so proud of actually avoiding. I mean, don't you understand? You're doing that in your heart when lust is sort of your way of life. You're just you're doing that very thing that you're so proud that you've not done. And so so I think that's why he wants to take it seriously, and how easily that can become habit and can become ingrained in us until we start thinking of people only in those terms, again, in our world, it's very easy to find places to look if you are so inclined. And I think he wants us to take that very, very seriously. And by the way, you don't have to literally be looking at someone, right? I don't take it in that sense that you're, literally somebody's there and you're looking at them, but as long as they're not there and you're not actually looking at them, it's okay. Of course not. You're still, you're dwelling on thoughts. That's what Jesus is getting at. And we're
I
to
got you.
avoid that. We're to take that seriously. We're to,
I got you. But seriously, what I'm thinking is, you see, the spiritual things about us today is quite serious that we cannot detain. It's quite serious because things that Jesus was saying here, if that thing is happening between you and somebody, and as I'm standing there, I cannot figure it out. That means I cannot figure it out. That what is your mind, I don't know. What is your mind for looking at the Pharaoh that moment? But to me, as a brother, as a sister, maybe I take you as a brother, as a sister. So the mindset that the other party is looking at you, I will not figure it out now. He is looking at you in a different content or different scenario, but deep down his or her heart, there is something going on. I can't figure it out.
you don't know. You don't know somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is true. And that's why I think Jesus is here saying this is something for us to be honest about with ourselves. This is something for us to be clear on, in our own minds, our own hearts. Take this seriously, in and of ourselves. In none of these does he say police other people, right? In all of them, he says police yourself, police your own heart, your own mind, your own thoughts. Colette, were you gonna say something?
Yeah, when I look at this, I think too that this is internally in our hearts, this is where sins begin. And so he's calling our attention to that, other than the fact that outwardly we put on a good show. We can be pretenders like we're followers of Christ because we know the right things to do, the right way to act. We can be hypocritical in the fact that we're claiming to be like Christ, but in our hearts we're lusting, or we're stealing, or we're hating, or we're lacking the ability or the desire to forgive when we need to forgive. So it all starts with our hearts internally, because no one can see it, like you and Jacob are talking about. No one can see what's in my heart, but if I'm really truly trying to follow Jesus, I know if it's being corrupted by lusting or whatever the issue is. And so sin starts in the heart. And yes, what's in a man is what comes out of him that makes him unclean. And so it's that same thread, if you will, that is what comes out of us is what makes us unclean, because it's what's inside of us. So I think it's like, look deeply or pay attention to what your desires are internally.
Yeah.
What am I desiring internally? Does it reflect the outward? Does it reflect me being like Jesus? If it doesn't, we have a problem, right? We have a rub. And that makes us really stop and think, well, what kind of Christians are we? Or, are we just hypocritical and saying one thing and doing something else? I'm sorry, being something and appearing something else.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. And again, all of these that we're talking about, they're Well, yes, and but I mean, we all make mistakes. We all have sins in our lives. We all I don't think it's like, um, every time you ever have struggled with one of these things in your heart or in your mind, it just means
Be aware.
take that be aware. Okay, it's there now, right? That's a possibility. So take it seriously. Be strong in dealing with these things. And the cutting off, it just kind of reminds you, I mean, what should you avoid? What should you be aware of? What should you watch out for? What should you uh, how might you need to uh, change your life so that you can change your heart? And again, that's something that other people can't tell you, that you have to sort of come to and take seriously. If you don't take it seriously enough to make those changes, then maybe you're not taking it seriously enough.
I think you make a good point with, if I notice it in my heart, then I don't know, saying going where someone is, I don't know. If I notice it in my heart that that's there, then I need to avoid being in that environment. That's my work. Is that, oh no, I can go, but I know sometimes I'm lusting, but I'm still gonna go. Then I'm not doing the work that I'm nudged to do,
Yeah,
because I have to be aware that these things do pop up. And sin is not something necessarily we put there. It's something sometimes it's just happens because we're sinful beings, and then we have to do the work to kind of go a different direction. It's not always like that, but it is part of the work.
I was just reading a guy today who's a friend of mine who does a lot of writing, and he was writing about and this isn't specifically about this, but it kind of is too. He was writing about how his wife, he had was putting something in the refrigerator, and his wife said, "Don't put anything on top of the eggs." And there was a whole story about that because somebody had put something heavy on top of the eggs and had broken the eggs, and eggs are expensive. And so she was saying, "Don't put anything on top of the eggs." And he was like, "I don't think I ever did. I still don't think I ever did." And he said, and I felt in my heart, I felt this sort of turn toward defensiveness. I wanted to immediately say, I didn't do it. Why why? But instead I gathered myself and I said, okay, I'll be careful. Um, okay, that's what we're talking about, right? And he went on to talk about how, where that defensiveness comes from. Where does that come from? And he went on to say, you don't make other people deal with your stuff. You deal with your stuff, so that other people don't have to. Okay, I get that. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here. You don't make other people deal with your stuff. If you've got stuff, you deal with that yourself. And now that doesn't mean you can't have help and you can't have people praying with you and talking with you, counseling, Colette. But it just means we don't just let all the stuff in us dictate the way we live our lives and the things we do. We bring that the under submission to Christ and to Him as Lord. So that's kind of what we're talking about. That's this righteousness, this greater righteousness, right? We want to, we want to approach our life with Christ with this intention that we're going to, our righteousness is going to be greater than those who just maybe skip across the surface. And so similar is 31 and 32. And again, we read all of these with this sort of assumption, right? Greater righteousness. It's been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. That's from the law, Deuteronomy. It was intended to curtail a quick-tempered, hair-trigger divorce, because you have to take the time to write out the certificate, and you have to take the time, and you have to recognize what the law goes on to say, is that you're not then to remarry this woman that you have sent away. And apparently that was something that was fairly common, men divorcing and remarrying and divorcing and remarrying the same woman. Um, and and um, and so this is Jesus's way of dealing with this reality. The law actually says, I believe the phrase is, if a man finds something indecent in his wife, that's one translation, but it's a pretty common translation. Something indecent in his wife. And by Jesus's time, there were lots of debates about what something indecent might entail, might include. And some rabbis were like, if she burns the toast or puts on a couple of pounds or whatever, it could be anything. Basically, it was a flexible enough phrase that it could be sort of used to justify pretty much any treatment of any just this terrible treatment of women, because women had no options, right? You're divorced, now what? Maybe you go back to live with your family, your father, if he's still alive. Maybe someone else will have you. Remember the woman at the well? You had 5 husbands, and the man you're with now is not your husband. I mean, that was the kind of thing that could happen, that kind of situation that a woman could find herself in. And so by Jesus's time, that was just sort of common. And there was this debate about, well, what is the grounds for divorce? Jesus quotes what the law says. If you divorce your wife, you have to give her a certificate of divorce. That's what you've heard, right? That's what you understand. Jesus says, but I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, these verses have generated quite a lot of debate, and I'm not really all that interested in recounting and rehearsing and rehashing all that tonight. There are times to talk about that. I'm not sure this is the time to spend much on that, because Jesus's point is what? Let's get to his point right away. What is his point?
Honor your commitments.
Honor your commitments, right? There's one reason you might divorce your wife: sexual immorality. Interestingly enough, we're not exactly sure what Jesus meant by that. There's lots of different ways of sort of conceiving of that and thinking about that, but you sort of get the idea. If there's a sexual irregularity of some sort, a sexual immorality, then divorce is allowed by Jesus here, not demanded, allowed. But other than that, you don't divorce your wife. Why not? Why are you not to divorce your wife for any reason other than sexual immorality? We overlook this sometimes.
Usually there's a commitment, right? When you get an oath or something when you get married, right? Did they have that back then?
I'm sure they did.
Honor.
Yeah, I would think they did. I would think they did. Yeah.
We're supposed to honor that.
The NIV here does a really interesting translation. Makes her the victim of adultery. You divorce your wife, except for it makes her the victim of adultery. Now, some translations, I think a lot of translations say something like makes her commit adultery.
Well, you said you have NIV?
I've got the NIV. It's the updated. It was updated in
Oh,
2011.
It says, anyone who divorces his wife, except causes her to become an
Adulteress causes her to commit adultery. It's a passive verb, and so the NIV is trying to grapple with that and trying to grapple with the fact that a divorce shouldn't make the woman an adulteress. There's a couple of things maybe happening here. One is what I mentioned with the woman at the well, right? You've just victimized that woman. If you divorce her for any other reason, you've just victimized her. You've just created a situation where she is in an impossible life. She just, because in Jesus's day, there wasn't a lot of options for a divorced woman. One option might be, though, to get remarried. And so some you can think about it as you forced her into an adulterous relationship because you never should have divorced her at all. So either way, what's happened is you've taken this woman who you've been married to, who you've now divorced for no legitimate reason, you have now pushed her into a situation where, she's just got no options, got no good choices. And so it's this idea of thinking about, well, what have you done to this person? How have you ended up treating this person? It's a kind of a remarkable way to conceive of this, especially in Jesus's day.
It wasn't fair.
No,
Not plain and fair.
no, it wouldn't have been fair, wouldn't have been just, wouldn't have been right.
What is the punishment for the Ten Commandments?
Sorry,
You go-
I didn't catch the first part there. What did you say?
What is the punishment if you don't follow the Ten Commandments? You go to hell?
Well, in the law of Moses, some of the commandments, it was not specified what the punishment might be. Some were specified. Adultery, actually, in the Old Testament, adultery is punishable by death. And by Jesus's time, it does not seem like anybody did that. It doesn't seem like it was actually carried out. That's a fairly extreme punishment for adultery. But yeah, I think I think violating the Ten Commandments, it places you in jeopardy of, losing eternal life, losing because of your sin, because of sin. That doesn't mean, every time you have ever violated one of the commandments, Jesus's death forgives our sins and covers us. But if you're living a life in which you are just, pursuing the breaking of one or more of these commandments, yeah, I would say you're in danger there. You're in danger of your eternal life because you're not really, pursuing a life devoted to Christ. And so, and I say you, I don't mean you specifically, I just mean a person, is in danger, I think, in that situation. Does that help?
Yes.
Yes, and examples that we've been going in.
They're not. It's not.
Jesus can say on the one hand that he's come to fulfill the law and yet give all of these principles that this hearers seemingly haven't thought of before. That means that the law is not what they think it is. That's the point.
That is exactly the point. That is exactly the law. The law isn't exactly what you think. Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Righteousness isn't what you think it is. Righteousness is bigger than you think it is because righteousness has to do with your heart and your intentions and your thinking and what you dwell on. All of those things have to do with righteousness and just keeping or not keeping a particular law is not really, enough to consider. If you think about it, really, you go back and look at the Old Testament. A lot of the laws in the Old Testament would be very difficult to actually enforce. It's not a legal code like we think of it, because it is about, what does God want? What is important to God? What matters to Him? And how are we to live as His people? How are we to treat each other? How are we to relate to Him? That's more what the Ten Commandments are about, and it's awfully hard to legislate some of them. Again, thou shalt not covet comes to mind, right? Find a law code somewhere that says, this article, this makes coveting illegal. Well, coveting is not something you can make legal or illegal, really, I don't think. Maybe the lawyers can help me out there, but coveting certainly has something to do with your heart, and it has something to do with then how you live with other people. So, I think the law was always intended to be more than just a legal code that you either keep or not, though I think it was expected to be kept. But it was more than that. It was always about what does God want? And that's what the prophets kind of said over and over again, right? So, I mean, let's look at the next one here. Verse 33. Again, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. You will see in the Old Testament sometimes somebody will say something like, as surely as the Lord lives, da 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 da. I will do this, or I won't do this, or may the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I do not, do this thing that I'm promising to do. It was a fairly well, demonstrated way of making promises, making vows in Jesus's time and before. And it was very important under the law that if you make a vow in which you invoke the name of God, you better keep it. There's a commandment about that. What's the commandment about that?
Thou shalt not lie.
Sorry, what?
Thou shalt not lie.
Well, yes, that's one too, probably. That probably is also related to that. But there's another one that's maybe even more specific. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. That's what that's about.
Right.
We kind of think of it now as about, cursing and that sort of thing. In the context of the Ten Commandments, it's about not swearing oaths that you have no intention to keep. You don't use God's name as a way of papering over your dishonesty. If you make a vow to the Lord, you keep it. Vows to the Lord were allowed, were certainly allowable, but if you make that vow, you better keep it. What does Jesus say?
It shouldn't be necessary.
Let your yes be yes, let your no be no. Do not swear an oath at all. It should not be necessary. Should not be a necessary thing for you to swear. Does that mean that when you go to court, you shouldn't take an oath? I don't think that's what that means, though. I mean, if that's your conviction, then you shouldn't. But I don't think that's what Jesus is getting at. I think the point here is that, it's not about in Jesus' day, it seems like people were sort of cheating a little bit. You could, if you swear by the Lord's name, that's one thing. But if you swear by the heavens, that's maybe a different thing. What does Jesus say about that? It's God's throne, right? Why would you? Don't take that lightly. Don't take that lightly. Or you might swear by the earth, by the ground I'm standing on. I'm going to do this, and you have no intention of doing. Jesus says, it's earth. That's God's footstool. Why take that lightly? Not by Jerusalem. That's the city of the great King. That's God's city. Don't swear by your head, because you can't control anything about your life. You can't make one hair on your head black or white. His point being, all these ways in which we try to lie, as Darlene pointed out, all these ways in which we take the Lord's name in vain, all these ways we try to skirt the truth, it's just as serious as if you are taking the name of the Lord in vain. It's the same disregard for letting your yes be yes and your no no.
About that law school? About swearing in court? Did they teach you something?
Oh, yeah.
It seems small.
There's always been an exception.
Yeah.
People that take this literally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There is. And if you literally don't think you should take an oath in court, you should not. Don't do it. I don't think that's what Jesus has in mind, particularly here. But I certainly appreciate somebody who takes that seriously and doesn't want to do that.
can show where Jesus and God himself in effect took oaths.
That's very true. That's very true. There are examples, and that does sort of put a little bit of a twist in it. There are examples of Jesus doing exactly that, and God doing that, taking an oath on his own on his own name, and swearing by his own name.
I always wondered, why would you believe somebody who did that? You wouldn't believe them at any other time.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, they're trustworthy because they're saying a certain formula, like, that doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
Make them sound suspicious.
Right.
Well, letting your yes be yes and your no be no is almost like being an oath, that you're so trustworthy that if you say, I will do this or no to that, it is as though the gravity of it is like an oath. And that's how God wants us to be, right? My word being, yes, I will, should be enough. I don't have to swear about anything.
Yeah.
Because that's the intensity of it. That's the honesty of it. That's, the integrity behind our words as Christians. It's like an oath. He said he's going to do it, so he's going to do it.
Yeah, you should be known as a person who will do what they say they're going to do, and who you can trust and you can believe in.
The reality of our word is crucial as Christians in God's eyes with its oath thing.
And there's all kinds of reasons we try to cheat that sometimes as human beings, and there's all kinds of reasons we're tempted to do that, but it winds up undermining us. It undermines other people's trust in us. It undermines, who we are before the Lord. It just kind of digs at our integrity and our character.
But is it not possible? This is the reason why the judiciary was taking this to scare people, in the sense that what Jesus said, if you are a Christian, you know very well that what the witness that I'm coming to bear, I cannot swear the Bible and say something different for you to tell the truth. Because you believe in the Bible. You believe that what Jesus said here, I shouldn't make the Lord's name in vain. That means the truth, my yes will be yes, no will be no. That's what the judicial stand on. If you are using the Quran, they believe that you are a Muslim who believe in the Quran. And specifically, you can see these two contexts, the oath and the divorce, they are all in the same ground. If you know you can't keep a wife, you shouldn't marry Paul, as Paul said. If you know you can't keep a husband, then don't even involve of marry. If you know you can't keep the agreement, because one who divorced broke the agreement between the two. So if you know you can't content with the agreement, then don't involve. Otherwise, you will play the guilty one later.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. All of these, you're right. All of these are connected in that way of being who we, as Colette pointed out earlier, being who we represent ourselves to be as Christians, as followers of Jesus, being those people, and not allowing our inner lives to undermine what our behavior looks like.
And this topic, it hit where that family the man killed the 8 kids.
Yeah.
Because the woman wanted to divorce him, and that really hurted my heart real bad. And this what we talking about tonight, it just hit home right there to this topic.
It has real world consequences, doesn't it? When we violate these things, it undermines our relationships. It hurts innocent people. It it creates a world in which, there's violence and there's hatred and there's evil and it's coming out of us because we're letting these things, we're not trying to reach out for this righteousness that Jesus says we should be reaching for. And it is a reach, it's a stretch, and it's supposed to be a stretch. And that's the point. We're, thankfully, we have the blood of Christ to forgive the mistakes that we make, but that doesn't change that Jesus wants us reaching for this greater righteousness that goes far beyond just the keeping of some commandments here and there. And that evolve, that changes, that, the way we keep these things might change as our circumstances change and our hearts change and our minds, but always we got to be reaching beyond just the legalistic keeping of a few rules so that we can really reach for God's heart, which is what we'll see as we get to the end of this chapter.
Yeah, Patrick, you make me think about, I'm reading this book, it's The Gospel of Being Human. And when you say greater Christian, what'd you say, greater spirituality? Righteousness.
Yeah.
And the whole point of the book is making is that God wants us not just to become Christians, but we should be evolving, becoming more like him, literally, that, that things are falling off and we're picking up things that reflect who God is. And so becoming, more righteous in who we are, and not self-righteous. That's not what I'm talking about, but it's a character change. Maybe that's a better way to say it. But the character is being a reflective one of Christ. And that if we're not to just be like, oh, I'm a Christian and do all the right and Christian things. And, I don't cuss, I don't smoke, I don't drink. But are we growing in these hard kind of things that you're talking about in the Beatitudes? Are we really becoming the heart of God?
Doing the inner work, doing the stuff inside that's hard. So there's sort of a term that's become sort of popular among theologians in recent years, and I'm usually a little resistant to get on bandwagons with things like that. But I like this term. The idea is God intends for human beings to live flourishing lives. That doesn't mean successful. That doesn't mean wealthy. That doesn't mean you have it. It means you're growing and you're vital and there's life there and that's kind of what Jesus is aiming at here, right? That we're not to just settle for keeping a few rules. Jesus wants us to live flourishing lives in our marriages and in our relationships and when we're dealing with other people and all of these things. He wants our lives to flourish. He wants us to be fully human, and fully as we're intended to be, as he created us. And I think that's just a wonderful way to think about it, because I think it gives a lot of credit where it should to God, who wants this for us, who intends this for us, and who made us in this way.
And I think that we surprise ourselves. I think that's one of the things I personally love about being a Christian is whatever I'm working on and I put the time in and I really give it over to God. And then one day I'm in the same situation. I go, oh, I didn't lose my temper.
Yeah.
Oh, I was more patient. And you'd see this growth.
Yeah.
And of course, when it peels up, that day 2, I didn't lose my cool, or day 3, it's just this growth in the likeness of whatever you're working on. I'm using those trite, I shouldn't call that trite, but I'm using those examples, but that's the full life. He says, I come that you may have life and have it to the full, and the flourishing and, purely human, that doesn't just stop at us calling ourselves sinful natures, but means that I'm now becoming more like Christ because I'm created in his image. So it's a lot of work, but it's exciting when you see the change in self.
And it is a lot of work, but it's God's working with us, right? Paul talks about that. God's working with you to will and to act for his good purposes. God's at work in you as you do this, and we know where it comes out. right? Because of Jesus, we know we get there eventually.
Right.
It may be one step forward, two steps back sometimes, but we get there eventually because of Jesus. And so I think it is something that should be kind of considered joyful, even though it's hard sometimes. But it should be something that's there's some joy in because we're getting there. We're getting to that, and God is bringing us there. So yeah, so don't let sometimes people read the Sermon on the Mount and get discouraged because it's so hard. But it's God's at work and we're reaching. It's a stretch for us, and that's okay because God's at work in us, help making these things happen in us. Well, we got to wind it up for today. Next week we will pick up with eye for eye and tooth for tooth. My general way of dealing with people. And we will talk about that and then go on from there. Thank you for your good comments. Really enjoyed hearing from you all, and as I always do, and I'm grateful for your presence with us. Hope you have a great rest of your week.
Good night, everyone.
Good
You
night.
too, everyone.
Good night, Darlene. Take care.
Good night.
Right.